And please, ladies and gentlemen, you're watching, yes, the Yankees Entertainment and Sports Network.
The captain of the New York Yankees, Thurman Munson.
He did things that you'd go, man, this guy can really play.
I was totally amazed always at Thurman. I thought he was one of the greatest competitors I've ever known.
Munson keeps it alive for the Yankees. Munson, beautiful throw.
Lethal Thurman Munson at bat.
Munson makes the play.
It was Thurman who was known as Family Man. He attempted to get back home as often as he could, but unfortunately it took his life.
When you come into the locker room, it's one of the first things you notice. Man, that was Thurman Munson's locker. That's all you got to say.
The way he played the game exemplifies what we have been about.
Thurman Munson was quite simply everything you wanted your catcher to be. Bigger than life with a menacing scowl that said, "Don't you dare try to cross this plate." Hi, I'm John Sterling for the Yes Network, and this is Yankeeography. For 11 years, Thurman Munson was the wall behind home plate for the New York Yankees. But that scowl and imposing presence was somewhat misleading, especially to his family and to those who got to know him as a friend. Thurman Munson wore many hats during his short life. He was a family man, a hard-nosed player, and a dedicated, though reluctant, leader.
One of the greatest warriors I ever knew. Thurman, I can remember the day I called him in to make him the captain. I said, "Thurman, we need somebody to lead us."
Thurman was just, he was the leader, he was the captain, he was the soul of our team, really. Played hurt all the time, had a very unorthodox way of playing the game as far as a catcher, but got the job done all the time. He was the guy that really just went out there and led by example.
The phrase that always comes to me, somebody would complain, and he'd use one word, retire. If he heard anybody complain, he'd go to him and say, retire. He was a gladiator. I mean, he was a warrior. He was a professional that did whatever it took to win.
I had the privilege of being able to hang around Thurman for a little while, and he was grumpy. I mean, he was wonderfully grumpy. You know, the guys would tease him because he was so grumpy, but he was such a competitor that they allowed him his grumpiness. They admired his grumpiness, and they just, you know, loved being on his team.
He was a great teammate. He was one of those guys where he didn't say a lot, but when he said something, he had a reason to say it. I mean, and everyone listened.
Thurman enjoyed playing baseball. He liked playing baseball. He had a sense of tradition for the history of the game, and at the same time, he enjoyed catching. It was the most challenging position on the field, and it was a position that demanded not only physical ability, but thinking, the mental process of it. And Thurman really relished that.
Munson's dedication to his craft and his captaincy helped the Yankees reach a place they hadn't been in 15 years.
Almost on his shoulders, he was determined to restore the Yankees to championship level. And he lived to see that. He did it. 3 straight World Series, 2 World Championships, a slew of gold gloves, great offensive honors. You could easily fill up a Hall of Fame plaque for Thurman Munson.
But far beyond his feats on the field, it was his family that gave Thurman the greatest joy. And in the grind of a baseball season, he did all he could to see them.
Diane and the kids were foremost in his life. One of the reasons he bought an airplane, so he could go back and forth to Canton from time to time.
We always knew he was a devoted family man. You know, he loved being home. When he was home, that's where he was at. He was not at a baseball field. He wasn't a Yankee. He was Thurman Munson.
He would come home probably 2 or 3 times a week. He would want to tuck the kids in at night, read the bedtime story. He would want to go in the pool with the kids, as tired as he was. It was just interesting because he never gave up that family bond, no matter what he was doing or no matter what he was involved in. The one thing I could always say about Thurman Munson is his family was number one from day one.
He was a great dad. He was fun. We would play games like Monopoly and Parcheesi. Those were big family games we'd play. And, you know, being tired, having to fly home. But he always took the time. It was a very big thing, and I'm glad he did it.
His loss, of course, was felt hardest by his family, but by his baseball family, too.
To lose a guy like him in baseball is a bad thing because he was what baseball is all about.
You don't realize what you have till you lose it, and this was certainly the case with Thurman. How are you going to replace a guy like that? You don't.
I had the feeling that it would never be the same. You know, I said to myself, I'm going to win games, but it'll never be the same again. Because you can't replace him. There was no way to replace that man.
Thurman Lee Munson was born in Akron, Ohio in 1947. His older brothers taught him baseball on the family farm, and at the age of 12, he met his one and only love.
When I met Thurman, I knew. I came home, and as girls do when they're in grade school, I wrote Mrs. Thurman Munson and, you know, the hearts and all of that, and people would laugh, and I said, you know, someday I'm going to marry him.
Diana was so convinced she had met someone special, she even told her father.
I said to my parents, just as a little child, you know, this kid, Thurman Munson, my dad, big Italian man, went, what? What name was that?
And it was a joke. I said, Dad, someday you're going to read about Thurman Munson. He's going to be a professional baseball player. Well, of course, that's everybody's dream. But I knew that Thurman had something positive and something almost charismatic, that he in fact could do this. Well, he had me convinced. And eventually my dad became a real big believer.
At Lehman High School, Munson was all-city and all-state in both football and basketball, but his passion was baseball. He was offered scholarships for football and baseball, but it was Kent State baseball coach Moose Paskert who won him over.
Moose had said things to Thurman about, you know, his future that Thurman liked, and Thurman wanted to be close to home. So it was a good fit.
After a solid season in the Cape Cod League in '68, Munson was the 4th overall pick in that year's draft.
Everyone's dream is the Yankees. I don't care what anyone says. That is the epitome of tradition, and Thurman was thrilled to be a Yankee.
Munson signed on his 21st birthday and reported to AA Binghamton.
He just signed that year, and he had signed out of Kent State. He was at Binghamton, and he was very confident. They came in and played a game in Yankee Stadium, an Eastern League game in Yankee Stadium before one of our games once. And I was sitting on the bench watching the game before our game, and Thurman jumped up on the bench and he said, "Hey, Stick," he said, "you're in on everything here." He says, "When the heck are they bringing me up?" He had only been signed maybe 6-8 weeks.
Brimming with confidence, Thurman had another good year and topped it off by getting married to Diana in September. He joined the Yankees for spring training in '69, but would start the season at Syracuse before getting called to duty in the Army Reserves.
Thurman Munson and Joe Verbanek and I were, Joe Verbanek was a relief pitcher. We were all in the same reserve unit, and we had to go to summer camp at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Everybody was going through the same thing. It was, you know, it was either that or active duty, and we were very fortunate that we could do what we did.
He was able to drive on the weekends to Yankee Stadium and actually got to have a few at-bats. And the fans warmed up to him immediately, and it was just amazing. He was thrilled.
Thurman made his Yankee debut on August 8th of '69. He caught an Al Downing shutout and got his first hit of Catfish Hunter.
Well, unfortunately, I couldn't be there, but he did call me immediately. And I remember that was one of our largest phone bills because he could not stop talking about his excitement and how it felt and what he thought he could do. It was amazing because he believed in himself, and that entire experience made him know that he could do it.
Coming up next.
Late 60s, early 70s, when Thurman arrived, back in those days, rookies were kind of seen and not heard, you know. Thurman was a little different rookie.
Thurman Munson won the starting catcher's job in 1970, but it quickly became clear he was no ordinary rookie.
Back in those days, late 60s, early 70s, when Thurman arrived, rookies were kind of seen and not heard, you know. Thurman was a little different rookie. He was seen and heard.
I'd heard a little bit about him from the organization. He was one of the top-rated players, and when he come up, he was going to be a catcher there for a long period of time. But my first impression is, boy, where did this cocky young kid come from?
Though Thurman didn't hit much at first, the Yankees weren't concerned. They knew he'd win them games with his glove. But even they were surprised at how quickly he took charge behind home plate.
I remember a few times pretty brashness on his part. You know, you got guys out there like a few of the veteran pitchers that have been around for a while. He put down one or two, and, you know, they'd be looking at him, and he'd call timeout. He'd march right out there, and they'd get it settled right then, and there wouldn't be any problem after that.
Yeah, well, it was like most good catchers. He was in control. He didn't hesitate. He didn't leave it up to anyone else. He took that responsibility. He'd be right out on that mound and say, look, this is what I see you're doing wrong. And as a pitcher, you don't have this photographic image of what you're doing out there. So therefore, you need someone who can correct you right then and there. And he was able to jump on it right away and help you.
He was so sure of himself and so sure of what he could do behind the plate. But he was known for his quickness behind the plate. He was as quick as anybody I've ever seen, you know, come out from behind that crouch and get a jump on the balls, bunted balls, and certainly in his throws to second base.
Thurman led the league with 80 assists. He also threw out base runners with remarkable consistency, and those early hitting woes soon disappeared.
We were in Washington at the Shoreham Hotel. He was in a slump to start the season, and Thurman was distraught. He didn't know where to go, what to do. He came in after the game, went straight up to the room, and I walked in with him, and he just sat on the bed, didn't want to go eat, didn't want to do anything. And here I was trying to encourage him. Thurman beat me by 80 points that year.
It all added up to Rookie of the Year. Fresh off his first season, Thurman spent the winter in Canton with Diana and daughter Tracy, at the time just a baby. And then it was back to work. The Yankees had an off year in '71, but Munson just got better.
Thurman was a real throwback, as you probably heard 100 times. He was an old school type ball. He just looked like a down in the trenches type player.
When they talk about a throwback player, they're talking about people that don't mind getting their uniform dirty, you know, and get down in with it and will block the plate and do the things that you're supposed to do to win ball games.
They called him the Wall for obvious reasons. And in time, most players chose not to run through him. Remarkably, Thurman made just one error the entire '71 season and was voted to his first All-Star team. As always, Thurman did his best to balance baseball and family.
His family life wasn't always what he wanted it to be. So he wanted to make sure when he had his own children that he had a bond with them.
In December, Diana gave birth to their second child, Kelly. Thurman couldn't have been happier.
And it was so interesting to see such a perceived tough guy, such a person whose exterior was gruff in other people's eyes, to see his gentleness. You know, that maybe that's why they say Thurman was an enigma. All I know is we got to see the soft side of him, and it was special.
Williams Electric Shave. The razor will shave closer, cleaner, with less irritation.
I'm going to use Electric Shave. They'll be the best looking catcher in the game.
Well, one of the best.
With George Steinbrenner taking charge in 1973, a change was in the hair. Beards, mustaches, and mop tops were out. Skin was in for everyone. Thurman brushed it off and had a solid year, but the Yankees still finished fourth. And though Munson was considered one of the game's top catchers, he was still ranked below Cincinnati's Johnny Bench and Boston's Carlton Fisk.
Thurman was of a mind that Kirk Gowdy, who was doing the Game of the Week for NBC in those days and was from Boston, was inflating Fisk's stardom at the expense of Munson and making Fisk out to be a far greater ball player than Thurman was. When one was batting and one was catching, you know, Munson could be heard like, listen, Fisk, I read what you said in the paper yesterday. And Fisk and Munson developed this genuine dislike for each other.
Managers and players came and went on the Yankees the next couple of seasons, but Munson remained a fixture behind the plate. In 1975, he had a banner year both in the field and with the bat. Thurman won his third Gold Glove award and knocked in more than 100 runs for the first time ever. In addition, Thurman and Diana welcomed into the family Michael, their third child. Life was good for Munson in 75, except the Yankees finished third, and he spent the postseason home once again. Though the Yankees struggled, Munson remained the constant. Finally, in 76, Steinbrenner decided that Thurman should be the team leader and rekindled a tradition that had lain dormant on the Yankees since 1939.
Joe McCarthy's intent when Lou Gehrig took himself out of the lineup in 1939 was that there would never be a Yankee captain again. The position was going to be retired with Lou. To his credit, George Steinbrenner said, well, if Joe McCarthy or Lou Gehrig knew Thurman Munson, they'd know this was the right guy.
I said, Thurman, we need somebody to lead us. We need a leader, or we're not going to make it. We don't have leadership.
He was not one who would give speeches, and he was never comfortable even being designated captain.
Finally, he says, I don't want to be the captain anymore. I said, well, that's too bad. I'm paying you, and you're going to be the captain.
He played as the captain, and everybody knew it. You didn't have to name him captain to know he was the captain.
The reluctant leader flourished in the newly renovated stadium. Thurman drove in 105 runs and won the league MVP award. It was the leadership by example Steinbrenner had hoped for.
He was a wise, sound leader by actions. And then if something was amiss, you knew it.
He was a guy that really just went out there and led by example. He wasn't a big talker, he wasn't a rah-rah guy. But when you see a guy go out there and on bad knees trying to run and catch, that's inspiring.
Still today, Munson remains the only Yankee ever to win awards for both Rookie of the Year and Most Valuable Player.
That season, he decided that he was going to go for it all, I think, and just, you know, take the Yankees where they needed to go. And he did.
Under Thurman's command, the Yankees won the pennant and faced Bench and the Big Red Machine in the '76 World Series. The mighty Reds swept the Yankees, despite a hitting performance by Munson that drew raves.
He is really a good hitter. Woo, he's a good hitter. This mother can hit, can he? Oh, he can hit. He just stays right with the ball. He doesn't do anything. He just stays right there and keeps everything in and goes with the ball.
Although Sparky was obviously impressed with Munson's hitting prowess, he stirred up a hornet's nest with less flattering words during a post-game press conference.
He said something like, you know, don't try comparing Thurman Munson with Johnny Bench. You can't compare anybody to Johnny Bench.
That is one of the first times that I saw him really reeling with hurt.
Thurman took that personally and really lashed out at Sparky Anderson, and the Yankees had just lost 4 straight anyway. This really heightened the frustration for Thurman.
The way it came out, it made it sound like Thurman wasn't even anywhere near the player that Johnny Bench was. Couldn't even be in the same ballpark, and that wasn't true, you know, because Thurman had just had a great World Series, and you know, if we'd all played as well as Thurman did that series, we would have swept them 4-0.
Still to come.
The term Bronx Zoo at the time fit because between the 77 and 78 ball clubs, we were a great soap opera.
Severe weather.
Welcome back to Yankeeography. Before the 1977 season, Thurman Munson was asked about the prospect of bringing Reggie Jackson to the Yankees. Absolutely, he said, knowing full well it would help to make the Yankees a better team. But what Thurman hadn't planned on was the tension and the turmoil that Reggie would create in a clubhouse that, up until that point, had been pretty much Thurman's domain. In New York City, circa 1977, there could be only one straw to stir the drink.
Reggie, put the hat once more on you.
When the Yankees signed free agent outfielder Reggie Jackson for the 77 season, they knew they were getting an outspoken superstar. But one question had to be asked before Reggie ever put on the pinstripes.
Reggie, what were you thinking? Reggie did an interview for Sport magazine, and he knew it was for sport because there's nobody as media savvy as Reggie. And he did an interview before joining the Yankees in which he criticized Thurman's leadership. Reggie said, "I'm the straw that stirs the drink. Munson can only stir it bad." And I was like, wow.
Reggie came in and says, "I'm the straw that stirs the drink," you know, and Thurman, I know, didn't take that too kindly because I was with him that day.
And somebody said to Munson at one point, well, maybe he was misquoted. And Thurman said, "For 9 pages?" So that was not a good way to get off on the Yankees. Because it not only alienated Munson, but all the other guys who loved Munson. This was Thurman's ball club.
Thurman Munson was the leader of the Yankees. He was beloved by most of those guys on the team. And when they read what Reggie had to say about Thurman, they were absolutely furious. And the one who was the most furious, of course, was Billy Martin, the manager of the team.
So Billy wouldn't get along with Reggie. Reggie wouldn't get along with Billy. Munson wouldn't get along with Reggie. Reggie wouldn't get along with Munson. Everything was going on.
You just don't get 25 guys that you get along with all of them. So if you don't get along with a couple of them, you know, it doesn't make any difference. You're going to get out and play like hell anyway.
The unique atmosphere in the Bronx led to an appropriate nickname.
The term Bronx Zoo at the time fit because between the 77 and 78 ball clubs, we were a great soap opera. You know, people would tell me, I can't wait to pick up the paper to see what's happening with you guys.
The zoo-like atmosphere in the clubhouse generated a feeding frenzy by the media, to which Thurman developed a decided distaste.
When things got more controversial around the Yankees, and he as captain was kind of in the center of it, he just didn't like the vibes he was picking up about how the media was going to try and dig up dirt and not concentrate on the games themselves. And he just said, I'm not going to have any part of that. So to almost any question, he would just say, I'm just happy to be here. It was just another way of saying, I'm not talking to you.
But despite the off-field distractions, Munson remained brilliant on it.
Munson's throw going to be close. They got him. And he's out. Holy cow.
Thurman also had a good year at the plate, hitting .308 with 100 runs batted in. His third straight year with a .300 average and 100 ribbies. More importantly, he led the team into the playoffs for the second year in a row, where the Yankees survived a 5-game battle with Kansas City.
The Yankees win the American League pennant.
The Yankees were off to the World Series, where they faced the Los Angeles Dodgers. The series put Munson and Jackson together in the spotlight, and they both excelled. Thurman hit .320 with 2 doubles and a home run. But it was Reggie who earned the nickname Mr. October with a .450 average and 3 home runs in Game 6. A stirring World Series title as a way of making any drink taste good.
I'm the straw that stirs the drink definitely created a strain between Jackson and Munson, but in some ways was healed by the big year that Reggie gave them in '77 and the, 3 home runs in the last game of the World Series. And you can see Munson with this big smile in the dugout congratulating Reggie. And that smile's not a pretend smile. I mean, he appreciated what that guy had done, taking them to the top.
Thurman, I've got to ask you a question. Yes, I do. Because we're both from Ohio, and we're both Buckeyes. Now, let me ask you this. Do you want to go back to Cleveland, or are you happy here in New York?
I'm not going to answer that question. I'm trying to be happy right now.
You are happy, but are you happy here? Do you want to stay here?
I like to play baseball. I'm going to play baseball somewhere. I'll tell you that. Okay, how's that?
All right. Okay, Thurman.
After winning it all in '77, Thurman was on top of the world. But he felt his life would be complete were he closer to his family in Canton.
He did talk about wanting to play for Cleveland, which bothered us all a lot in New York. We couldn't believe that this man who wanted to win so badly was sincere about wanting to go to Cleveland, but he did talk about that a great deal.
Well, I think he had talked to people about going to the Indians. I think he wanted to be close to the family. I think it was an idea that somebody threw out. I think he considered it. At times when it seemed like a zoo in New York, which, we know it can be a zoo, maybe he talked about it. But I don't think in his heart he was ever anything other than a Yankee.
Determined to have it all, professional excellence and a complete family life, Thurman took matters into his own hands.
He told me that he'd purchased a new plane so that he could spend a little bit more time at home and with his family.
Diane and the kids were foremost in his life. And one of the reasons he bought an airplane, one of the big reasons he bought an airplane is so he could go back and forth to Canton from time to time when time allowed.
He would come home probably 2 or 3 times a week, and it seemed to be working out for him. He would still want to tuck the kids in at night. He would still want to read the bedtime story, tired as he was.
He was a great dad. He was fun. He was constantly doing things that to actually kind of bother Mom. That included us, like we would just do goofy things, make snowmen outside, and we laid out in the lawn chairs and pretended like we were getting sun when it was freezing out and things like that. He was just fun.
I know the little girls, they used to cry. When they would get out of the bathtub, they'd say, please, we don't want you to dry our hair. We want Dad, because he does it gentle. So, he made sure that he did all those special things.
He had a tremendous love for Diane and for his kids. I used to fly with him from time to time to Canton on off days. And boy, the family really enjoyed having Thurman around home. And he enjoyed it also. And it was a good family situation.
Back on the ground, the game was taking its toll. Thurman's body was beaten up, and his teammates couldn't help but notice.
People in the stands didn't see him taped from almost the ankle to the neck. He was always in pain, knees, thighs. He was always bruised. He was a walking cast.
Hook out. Getting right in the helmet.
Going out there every day knowing that he's hurt. It's a tough game to play when you're healthy. When you go out and you're hurt as he was with the bad knees, and see him limping and crawling around when he went down, and see him go out there every day and do that down the stretch. That's when you realize what you have here, the type of person he was.
Thurman's struggles mirrored those of his team in '78, and neither quit as the Yankees capped off a miraculous comeback in spectacular fashion.
Deep to left. Yastrzemski will not get its home run. A 3-run home run for Bucky Dent. The Yankees now lead it by a score of 3-2.
And once the postseason pressure arrived, the captain was clutch.
Well, I remember a big home run he hit for us in the playoffs against Kansas City.
Deep left center. Wilson going way back. He'll not get to it. A long home run for Thurman Munson, and the Yankees lead it by 1. Thurman Munson coming through in the clutch. That's about as far as you can hit a ball in this ballpark.
Led by Munson, the Yankees would beat the Dodgers in the series for the second year in a row. And fittingly, the last out settled in the captain's glove.
This could be it. Yankees are the champions.
Thurman was a winner on the field once again. Now, it was time to get back to his first love.
The one thing I could always say about Thurman Munson is his family was number one from day one. There was never any doubt, I don't believe, in anyone's eyes.
Coming up next.
Goose, this is George. And I said, George who? And he said, George Steinbrenner.
He just said, it's Thurman. And as soon as he said it's Thurman, I knew.
I think it's just a feeling of being alone for an hour or two by yourself, and you're up there, nobody asks any questions. You don't have to put on any kind of an act. You just get up there and you enjoy yourself. You have to be on your toes, but it's just a kind of relaxation where you spend a lot of time by yourself, and I need that. I also need to get home a lot, so I love to fly.
He was fearless. Thurman was fearless in baseball, and he was fearless, I think, in flying.
Munson had taken his hobby to a new level. He upgraded to a twin-jet Cessna Citation and was flying home to Canton more than ever. While it had become a passion for Thurman, it was a concern for others.
I don't know that he was instructed enough for him to be in such a sophisticated aircraft.
In spring training one year, he was taking flying lessons, and by the All-Star break, he was in a jet, and it's just too much too fast.
I tried to talk him out of flying because I know enough about flying to know that when you go from a prop plane where response is immediate to a jet plane where it takes time for the engines to pick up the response, that's trouble.
But, you know, let me tell you, the guy was a good pilot. I was up in the air a lot with Thurman when he owned the prop jet type planes.
He'd always been wanting me to go up in the plane with him. I said, there's no way I'm going up in a plane with you.
He said, look, I don't care whether you live or die, he said to me, but I really care if I live or die. Nothing's going to happen.
He was brazen, though. He wasn't afraid, and sometimes maybe he didn't respect it enough, I would say that.
It just seemed like this hard-headed Munson. He was going to master this. He was going to have it his way. There was no clause in the contract that prohibited it. People did speak to him.
We talked about it extensively, and it was one of those things where once he decided, it was pretty much the way he wanted it.
Following a game in Chicago on August 1st, Thurman flew to Canton to spend the ensuing off day with his family. Bobby Mercer accompanied him to the airport.
When he got ready to take off, he said, well, do me a favor. He said, just go down to the end of the runway and watch me take off. And I never will forget when he took off. I mean, I couldn't believe that Thurman was up there in this jet. I mean, this most powerful machine, all by himself, and it was dark. And he just took off into the night.
Thurman arrived safely in Canton that night, but felt something was wrong with the jet. He decided to run a series of touch-and-go tests the following day. It was on one of those maneuvers that Thurman crashed, just 1,000 feet from the runway.
The phone rang, and the voice on the other line said, this is George. Goose, this is George. And I said, George who? And he said, George Steinbrenner.
You know, there was something wrong because he doesn't call. And you just don't know what it is.
He just said, it's Thurman. And as soon as he said it's Thurman, I knew.
New York Yankees and sports fans everywhere suffered a great loss tonight, that of star catcher Thurman Munson, who was killed this afternoon in an airplane crash.
My wife and I were eating dinner in New York City, and one of the waiters came over, a big baseball thing, and said, Phil, he says, I hope it's not true, but it just came over the airwaves that Thurman Munson was killed in an airplane crash. Oh.
Thurman Munson, the 32-year-old captain of the New York Yankees, is dead.
Roberto Clemente had been killed a few years earlier in a plane crash, but a modern athlete in the prime of his career, in such a high-profile position as being the captain of the Yankees. Boy, we hadn't seen that come in sports in a long time. This was huge.
My first reaction was shock. My second reaction was anger at Thurman because of the airplane.
Catfish lived across the street from me, and he came knocking on my door that night, and he says, you're not going to believe this. He says, Thurman's dead. I thought, man, he must be joking.
I was just shocked. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I just saw him. We just played a game together. I mean, that's impossible.
It was the most sickening, shocking thing that ever happened to me.
It was a surreal, harsh reality. Thurman Munson was gone in an instant.
3 people came to the door and told me what had happened, and just changed our world.
As hard as it was, the Yankees tried to play a game the night after Thurman died.
The weather was appropriate. It was a misty, cold rain. It was like tears enveloping the fans.
They had a big flower spread in front of his locker, and his catching gear was hanging up in the locker, and the locker was completely cleaned out. And I'll just never forget that. That's when I broke down, and that's when it really hit me, you know, just seeing that locker.
We pause to pray for Thurman Munson, our brother and your faithful son.
You could hear people, the fans in the stands, just weeping and crying. You know, we were just shocked.
The outpouring of emotion by Yankee fans for their fallen hero caught his teammates off guard and only compounded their grief.
It lasted for about 20 minutes, and those 20 minutes did feel like 20 years, but it was a tremendous tribute to Thurman, and I think the fans in New York knew exactly what kind of guy this was, what kind of ball player they had.
During the ceremony, home plate remained empty.
There was that gap in there, and he wasn't there. I had the feeling that it would never be the same. There was no way to replace that man.
I knew that the ball players were never going to be the same. I mean, they had to go in that field. I remember how hurt I was for all of them.
The Yankees lost the game that night 1-0, but with the funeral looming, games were not their priority.
I told them we're going to charter a plane and we're going to fly out to Thurman's funeral. Billy's going, the whole team. They said, well, we can't allow that because what if you don't make it back? I said, well, then tough. We don't make it back, we forfeit.
On August 6th in Canton, Ohio, players past and present joined the Yankees in their sorrow. The eulogies left everyone drained.
Billy Martin was a wreck. He was tough. Piniella, Mercer, I don't know how those guys got through those talks, those eulogy talks. I don't know how they did it, but they did it.
It was a traumatic day. It really was. Just all kinds of emotions, from sorrow and grief to some anger and just about any emotion that you can conjure.
We don't know why God took Thurman away from us. Nobody really knows that. But we all know that as long as we all wear a Yankee uniform, Thurman will never be too far from us. He'll be right with us.
It was genuine and sincere, and it only added to the tears that were in that funeral home that day.
Thurman Munson, who wore the pinstripes with number 15. But in living, loving, and legend, history will record my friend as number 1.
Then the Yankees faced the task of trying to compose themselves for that night's game.
Riding home on the plane from the funeral, Billy had told me that, he said, look, don't even worry about playing tonight. You get some rest, take the night off. You know, it's been a tough 2 or 3 days. And I told Billy, I said, for some reason or another, I feel like I need to play tonight. I'm not really tired.
The game was nationally televised. All eyes were on the Yankees and their missing comrade.
He was the best there was at what he did, and he was the pride of the Yankees.
You didn't really feel like playing, but you knew you had to. And it went out there and played. The team went out and played a heck of a ball game.
In the 7th, with the Yankees trailing 4-0, the last Yankee to see Thurman got the chance to close the gap to 1.
like a Hollywood movie, you know, just coming through for Thurman.
And then in the bottom of the ninth, still down by 1, Mercer brought the game to a poignant end.
This was for Thurman. This is in his memory.
And the amazing thing is that Bobby Mercer came to my house and brought that bat. He wanted me to have that.
It's almost symbolic. They won this game for their team captain.
It's a ball game that the people that played in it will remember the rest of their lives.
Emotion won this game.
It's a big lift. You know, we won the game because of the moment. But even the win was not joyous.
After the game, all the emotions were just like at the beginning. Everybody's crying.
It was difficult for us to rebound from that. It took us a while, even going into next year. You know, when you lose your leader, when you lose your spiritual leader on your team, your captain, it's tough.
The bottom line is we knew he wasn't coming back, and we all really felt bad for Diane and the kids that they're going to have to do it without Thurman.
I remember after the game, everybody going and one by one, standing in front of his locker. And I am still grateful that that locker's empty in the Yankee clubhouse.
Thurman Munson's legacy of hard work and dedication will never be forgotten. The Yankees are reminded of it every day.
His locker actually is right next to mine, so every day I come in, I see Thurman Munson's locker. There's something about it. I mean, it's almost what you feel out on the stadium about you almost feel that looking at his locker, too. Everybody was blown away by it. I mean, that's one of the things when you come into the locker room, it's one of the first things you notice. I mean, why is this locker? I mean, once you notice, man, that was Thurman Munson's locker. And that's all you got to say.
I just sense that Thurman is in everybody's ear during the course of the season. There's no question his presence in the clubhouse is felt because of his locker.
Munson is remembered and honored in Canton, too, with a minor league stadium dedicated in his memory.
It's wonderful to drive down the street and you see Munson Street, or, you know, to have somebody say, hey, I went to Thurman Munson Stadium the other night. It makes me smile. It would make Thurman smile.
Munson is, of course, enshrined in Monument Park, and his number is retired. Diana began the Thurman Munson Foundation in 1980 to benefit retarded children. Thurman's memory will never be lost. His legend will never die. He is a Yankee now and forever.
I went to opening day a few years ago, and I saw all the 15 and the Munsons there and realized that he truly was. I mean, he's transcended age and everything. He was the hero to a lot of people.
In my eyes, Thurman's still there. He's still, you know, he was there then. He's still at Yankee Stadium now. His spirit is amazing because he was an amazing man.
Thurman Munson has not stepped into Yankee Stadium in more than 2 decades, and yet his name resonates as though he were there yesterday. Much like another Yankee legend, the great Lou Gehrig, Munson was taken from us far too soon, and in a tragic way that's difficult to explain. We can only take solace in the fact that he died loving what he was doing with his life at the time, playing baseball, flying his plane, and spending time with his family. And this is how we'll always remember the captain, number 15. For the Yes Network, I'm John Sterling, and thanks for watching Yankeeography.